Help support AMTV by becoming a patron, an AMTV staff member, and following us over on Twitter. Hi there guys, it's Adam Martyn here, and this video is something that I didn't think I'd make on the channel, and it's a topic I've not really touched on during my years here on YouTube. It's to do with Power Rangers, and specifically with arguably the most famous Power Ranger who has sadly passed away at the age of 49. I'm of course talking about the legendary Jason David Frank. So I'm sure many of you know, but for those who don't, Jason played the role of Tommy Oliver, originally on the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, which was the first version of the show, which debuted in 1993. His character was the Green Ranger. It was only meant to be a short stint, but because he was so popular, he was brought back, and when he stopped being the Green Ranger, he then became the White Ranger, and he did a whole stint on the show, man. I mean, he was the Red Ranger in Power Rangers Zeo, and Power Rangers Turbo as well. Before coming back, he did a cameo in Wild Force. He also was the Black Ranger, or the mentor figure in Power Rangers Dino Thunder, and he's had cameos in, I believe, Super Mega Force, and also Power Rangers Super Ninja Steel, mainly for anniversary stuff. So Jason David Frank is pretty much revered amongst Power Rangers fandom. You know, obviously everyone loves his character. He seemed pretty cool in real life as well. He had real martial arts prowess, just as the characters did in the original show. He was a black belt in karate. I believe it was up to the 8th level or the 8th dan. He was experienced in several kinds of martial arts, such as taekwondo, judo, Brazilian jiu-jitsu. His accolades include being inducted into the World Karate Union Hall of Fame and the Black Belt Hall of Fame. And he also taught martial arts as well. He co-founded the Rising Sun Karate Academy, which hopefully will go on in his name, and he's obviously survived by 2 sons and daughters as well. And I think it's fair to say, when this news broke, this hit Power Rangers fans and people who just remembered this era of the show really hard, because if you watch Power Rangers in those original years, or you're familiar with those series, you know who Jason David Frank is. You remember Tommy Oliver. And to lose him at 49, and again, at the moment, I've checked all the official news sources I can, like the BBC and stuff. The actual cause of death hasn't been outrightly confirmed, but everything I'm reading indicates that this, unfortunately, was a result of suicide. And for someone to feel like they have to take their life at such a young age it's tragic. It's truly tragic. And again, this is early days. We don't know the full details and what was going on, but I guess it just goes to show, no matter how much of a positive persona someone can display on the outside, unless you're right there with them, you never know what's going on the inside, which just makes it all the more important that we reach out to our friends, our loved ones, both men, women, any gender, really, just to reach out and make sure people are doing okay and provide the help that they need. Just to try and add a positive spin to all this, I wanted to go back and give you my experience of Jason David Frank, and I guess the Power Rangers franchise as a whole. Again, it's not something I've really tapped into, and in the wake of JDF's death, some of you have been asking me to do something like this, so why not now? So I was born in 1996, which, for anyone who's keen with their dates, is when the original Mighty Morphin show was coming to an end and we were moving to Power Rangers Zeo. Now, the first Power Rangers show I remember watching from beginning to end was Power Rangers Ninja Storm, which first went out in 2003. Now, I found this really cool. Like, I think I'd heard of Power Rangers. I remember I'd played a smattering of video games. Like, I remember I had a Time Force game on PC, and I think I had something to do with Wild Force as well. Maybe I had some of the toys. But Ninja Storm was the first Power Rangers series I properly sat down and I properly watched. And I mean, you know, when you're a 7-year-old boy, I mean, what's not to like? I mean, the colourful costumes, the cool action, the Zords, just the entire thing captivated me. And like millions of other children and adults around the world, I became hooked. But next year was when it really stepped up a gear. That's when we got Power Rangers Dino Thunder. And in this series, Jason David Frank appears as one of the main characters. He's like the mentor figure, Dr. O, or as we all know him, Tommy Oliver. So this was my real first experience of who Tommy was. And it was quite early on in the season when we got the episode known as Legacy of Power, which was the 500th episode. And I guess as a sort of tribute, it was sort of a throwback to Ranger history thus far. So for anyone who's not familiar with the plot, at this point, Tommy is captured by the villain Mesogog, and as the Rangers try to figure out how to help him, they stumble across a video which basically archives Ranger history up to that point. So for me, again, 8 years old this time, this was my first experience of seeing the original Mighty Morphin team in action, including Tommy's introduction as the Green Ranger, then the White Ranger. And I got to learn about the other teams as well. So, Zeo, Turbo, and even the teams Tommy wasn't a part of. This was every team up until that point. So I learned about In Space, Lost Galaxy, Lightspeed Rescue, Time Force, Wild Force, and of course, my boys from Ninja Storm got a mention as well. So for me, that was it then. I was like, wait, hang on. So this guy, Dr. O, he's been a Power Ranger multiple times, and I really loved his character, especially when he actually got to become the Black Dino Ranger. I was like, I need to know more. I want to learn more about this stuff. Now, keep in mind, this was like 2004, 2005. DVD box sets of classic Power Rangers series weren't necessarily that accessible here in the UK at that point. And to go back and collect the VHSs probably would have been doable, but probably very cumbersome because, 2005 VHS was finally starting to bow out properly. DVDs were taking over. And of course, this is before any major streaming sites took hold. So I couldn't just go on Netflix, for example, and stream Power Rangers, Zeo, Turbo, In Space, whatever. So I worked with what I could get, and that meant going for the movies. Now, I didn't go for the original Mighty Morphin movie, partly because I could never find it in any of the stores. So what I was left with was this. Turbo! That's right, baby. Turbo, a Power Rangers movie, which first came out in 1997. Now, I know everyone dogs on this. It's just a glorified episode of the Turbo show. It didn't have the same budget as the original movie. It's arguably not as good as the original movie either. It was sort of a pilot to introduce the Turbo Power Rangers to audiences, and there are some cool moments there, but I remember as a kid, for a lot of the time, I'm going to be honest, I was so bored. Like, they don't get to properly morph and have like a massive fight until basically the last 20 minutes of the film, when they get the Zords out as well. And I remember as a kid, I'd always fast forward to that end bit just to watch that final fight. But again, Jason David Frank was in it the whole time as Tommy, and out of all the characters, he was the one I was drawn to the most. He came across as a charismatic leader. He was cool. He obviously knew his martial arts. And obviously there was lore connecting back to the original show there, with Kimberly and Jason making appearances as well. And then as I got older, as streaming became a thing, I then went back to the original Mighty Morphin show, and I got to see Tommy in action firsthand with the Green with Evil subplot, which first introduced him, then him coming back as the White Ranger. And again, this character's really likable, and no wonder why millions of people decided to connect with him over the years. So that was about 2013, funnily enough, the show's 20th anniversary, when I really watched Mighty Morphin. I caught a bit of Zeo in the Turbo series as well, but then I really sort of dropped off with Power Rangers. I was getting into adulthood, and there's nothing wrong with liking Power Rangers or anything like that as an adult, but it just dropped off my radar. I went on to other things. So it was nice to see that in the years since that he did come back to the show several times for anniversary specials, like I said, in Power Rangers Megaforce, and also in Power Rangers Super Ninja Steel as well. And particularly that fight he has in that with like an evil version of himself where he has the Master Morpher, I found that pretty cool. And in life, everyone has kind things to say about Jason David Frank, like the fans, especially at all the various conventions that he attended. People just have nothing but positive things to say about this dude, like the memories they have of him, and also his enthusiasm for Power Rangers. Some people, when they're associated with what is ostensibly a children's show, over the years they want to try and distance themselves from it. They don't necessarily want to go back to it. But Jason David Frank was never shy about, attending conventions or establishing that, yes, he was the original Green Ranger and how much that meant to a lot of people. He was involved in side projects as well, like the Lord Drakkon stuff for Boom Comics. And I believe up until his death, he was working on a new film, a new grittier film. And obviously at the minute, we don't know what the status of that is. Like, we don't know how much of that film was complete. Like, was it just beginning? Was it pretty much done? We don't know yet, but hopefully something will be able to be salvaged of that project to honour Jason's memory. And again, overall, man, it's just a shame. I mean, I've just given you my sort of personal history with the character of Tommy Oliver and Power Rangers, and again, just as a young lad, this character was very inspirational. In Dino Thunder, he was the wise mentor you feel you could trust and rely on. But then going back to his younger years when he was a younger Power Ranger, he was inspirational in a different way. He was cool, he was badass, he could do martial arts, he stood up for himself, he did what was right. It all sounds cliche, but it's true, those sort of characters can have such a positive impact on a young viewer, and it certainly did to me. And just, the tributes have been coming in. Walter Jones, who played Zack, one of the original team members, the original Black Ranger, he said, "I can't believe it. R.I.P. Jason David Frank. My heart is sad to have lost another member of our special family, because if you count the original 6 Rangers, Jason's only the second one to have passed away. The first person to go was, sadly, Tui Trang, who died at only 27 back in 2001 due to a car accident, which was tragic enough in itself. So just to round off, I just want to give a personal thank you to Jason David Frank for all the inspiration, everything he gave to me as a young child, as a young boy, how he inspired millions of others around the world, both in the 90s, the noughties, and I'm sure even some people in the 2010s as well. So the last thing I just want to round off with is, I hope you rest peacefully, Jason David Frank, and may the power protect you, always.